usually explore MLP on this channel, don't worry, I'm still doing that, but there are a few real-life topics that I've always wanted to discuss, and this is one of them. It's no secret that I happen to have something of a fascination with cryptozoology, and while I've been feeling increasingly disillusioned as of late, against my better judgment I still hold a candle for it because it's just fun. It's just an incredibly fun topic to research. That and I have actual family members who have seen things they cannot explain, so I don't really feel comfortable dismissing all eyewitnesses. Anyways, back when I was younger, I would occasionally browse the paranormal section of About.com, and one of the most interesting and badly named cases on the site was simply entitled The Creature of the Dump. While the account is at most only about 2 pages long, I found further research led down a surprisingly deep rabbit hole of new discoveries that goes just about everywhere. Which makes the fact that so few people are talking about this all the more fascinating to me. Now, this case was strange back in the day and has only gotten stranger as more information has come to light. Obviously, I can't claim to know whether any of this is true or not, and chances are most of it probably isn't. But the whole thing is just so wild, I just had to share it. There is a lot to go through, so for the sake of simplifying it all, I shall attempt to explain everything in the order of which I first uncovered it. And it all starts in Oregon, the year 1999. A woman who goes by Paula M. was routinely visiting old dump sites in search of vintage glassware and bottles when, one hot day, amidst a slew of odd burrows, she supposedly caught sight of something emerging from the earth. Assuming her digging had disturbed the animal, she ventured to satiate her growing curiosity. However, as she moved closer, what she allegedly saw was confusing to say the least. A light brown worm-like thing about 2 inches in diameter and covered in a layer of soft peach-like fuzz. Now, this was odd enough. However, such incredulity would not have been any lessened by what happened next. The sudden appearance of 2 large blue eyes upon what was presumably the creature's head. Especially since, up until now, there were no indications that such eyes even existed, let alone any discernible facial features. After briefly analysing its eyewitness, it simply stared towards the sun, swaying from side to side and ignoring any attempt by Paula to catch its attention. After about 5 minutes of this, the thing supposedly retreated back into its burrow, disappearing from sight. Fast forward to the early 2000s, the researcher running the paranormal section of About.com is contacted by Paula and decides to publish her story online. For years after, the story took on a life of its own. On the one hand, you have people offering numerous confirmed species as a suggestion, including the rubber boa, caecilians, short-limbed salamanders, amphispinians, glass lizards, skinks, and the western blind snake. Then on the other hand, you get the much more fantastical suggestions, such as the taserworm, kappa, a hypothetical giant sea nymph, and no, I did not make that up. One person would go so far as to warn Paula that the creature she saw may not have been entirely friendly, pointing to the fact that said animal appeared to deliberately draw more attention to itself as a clear sign of it trying to lure Paula towards it. One Natalie W. would bring up a sighting supposedly described by members of their own family in California. As little children, the sibling eyewitnesses were scared away from their backyard play when a worm-like entity sprouted from the ground up to a height of 8 feet in front of them. Whether or not the thing had any eyes was never brought up, though Natalie certainly seemed to think there may be some connection to the creature in Oregon. Indeed, others who have investigated the case have attempted to draw a connection between both these sightings and numerous other giant worm accounts that have appeared online. However, by far the strangest explanation came from one Louis C., a creature they called an ingot or lingot. According to the commenter, such creatures were often encountered by French military personnel during the final years of France's occupation in parts of Vietnam. Supposedly quite similar to the things seen by Paula, the creatures were apparently widespread, tending to live in burrows. They go so far as to claim the creatures were seen in the region where a mass disappearance had previously taken place, the implication behind this suggestion being pretty clear. While apparently filling French headlines, they were eventually forgotten, the only ones who really talk about them since being veterans of the French military. And of course, there's no corroborating material to be found anywhere online. All discussion on the topic merely derives from this one source, with nothing to prove the story wasn't just made up. Heck, even the mass disappearance they cite is still heavily debated regarding its veracity. Despite this, there are many who still embrace the story of the ingots and attempted to link it to other cryptids, such as the Mongolian deathworm. All this culminated with the theory that the creature of the dump, the ingots, and the Mongolian deathworm are not only one and the same species, but are actually the caterpillar for the Mothman. To be fair, they do explain how the dump creature could be a caterpillar, although the connection to the Mothman is a little bit vague at best. The story of Paula M. and the creature of the dump could easily have ended here. Yet another one-off creature feature added to the internet's infinite pile of unprovable claims. However, another reader by the name of Sandra would later write in after coming across something almost identical within the book Three Men Seeking Monsters by cryptozoologist and ufologist N.Redfern. The book describes Nick's exploits into the world of cryptozoology, alongside Richard Freeman and John Downs of the Center for Fortean Zoology in the summer of 2001. And yes, out of curiosity, I did go and get myself a copy. For the sake of clarification, this is not an endorsement. I have no idea how accurate anything in this book is. That being said, I am actually kinda glad I bought it, because there is way more to the story here than what appears online. If you'd rather not have the book spoiled, you can start watching here and come back later. For everyone else, here's a basic rundown, and I'm only going to quote and comment on the sections necessary for this video. Conducting a series of eyewitness interviews across the UK, Nick and his compatriots would meet one Malcolm Lees, supposedly a former RAF intelligence worker who had heard numerous UFO reports sent in by members of the public during his service. It is through this account that the strange events around Avebury were related second-hand. The story goes that around 1962, a middle-aged resident of Avebury was partway through her evening walk along the nearby standing stones when at about 10:30 that night she was approached by a small hovering ball of light. About 2 feet in diameter and 12 feet above the ground, it stopped midair about 15 feet away, dripping what seemed to be liquid metal before promptly exploding. Though temporarily blinded and brought to her knees by the flash, she fortunately didn't take too long to recover, yet as she cleared her eyes, she was confronted by a massive, milky white worm-like creature, about 5 feet long and 7 or 9 inches thick. While she was slowly getting to her feet, the creature shot its gaze in her direction, revealing 2 wide bulging eyes, before crawling awkwardly towards her like a caterpillar. Naturally, this was way too much. Quickly fleeing the scene, she barricaded herself into her home and called the police, whereupon she was eventually redirected to the nearby military base amidst much disbelief. By the time the incredulous investigators showed up, she was still barricaded in and still terrified by whatever the heck just happened. Upon reaching the site of the encounter, much to their surprise, said investigators were able to find and take samples from a 3-foot-long trail of slime at the base of a nearby standing stone. While further investigation was conducted, little more was apparently found. However, as strange as this certainly was, the story apparently didn't end with Avebury. According to Malcolm, rumours emerged about 2 years later that something strange was happening in the complex of tunnels below the Rudloe Manor military base. a failed and abandoned extension to said tunnels, was being plagued with the supposed sound of something dragging itself across the ground within. Eventually, 2 personnel saw the cause of such distress with their own eyes, claiming to have spotted a massive 12-foot worm thicker than a man's arm, travelling with astonishing speed into the darkness of the tunnels. Despite supposed attempts at hushing up discussion on the topic, the rumours persisted along with follow-up sightings up until the 1960s. Sightings that apparently included a giant 7-foot lizard. But the worm sightings didn't stop there either. Around June 1968, at least 2 sightings emerged in the vicinity of Stonehenge of the exact same thing, heading towards said structure at night, usually about 10 feet long and a foot thick. The eyewitnesses were a married couple and an off-duty police officer, respectively. Now, at this point into the interview, Malcolm changed his story. Apparently, he was initially deceiving them regarding the tunnel's location, later referring them to a set of tunnels a little further away from the base. As if it doesn't go without saying, even Nick Redfern was a little suspicious of this. To be fair, the interviewers did actually go to the news site that was indicated, and not only confirmed the guards outside did know of the rumours, so at least Malcolm didn't make that part up, but they were even allowed to investigate the tunnels themselves. Beyond a few drag marks, they didn't really find anything, of course, mostly because they caused so much noise trying to draw in a giant worm that they got themselves kicked out. While some further investigation was attempted, overall this is where the strange story of England's giant worm comes to a close. The core explanation presented for this and other sightings mentioned in the book is that a coven of ancient witches summoned eldritch shape-shifting beings that feed off fear to our world. A theory that is understandably controversial even in the cryptozoological community. At the very least, it's worth bringing it up for the sake of context. So where does all that leave us? Around 2017, About.com was rebranded to Dotdash and much of its paranormal content lost in the shuffle. The links now just lead to a completely irrelevant Fortco article, the original pages only being accessible via internet archives such as the Wayback Machine. As far as we can tell, the head researcher for the site has since moved on. We do know Paula was interviewed by a paranormal radio show prior to the release of the What Was It page. While the link is no longer supported, we can at least locate the show's website. So far, the only way of accessing the interview is through subscribing to the site, and given the fact the show has been active for years, we also have a lot of archives to look through. Even more frustrating when you realise we don't really have a specific date for when it was likely recorded. P.S. I know people are probably going to investigate this topic after I release this video, so it will be intellectually dishonest if I didn't point out this show has a lot of controversies, and I do not endorse either their views or their bad behaviour. I mean, geez, at least Nick Redfern never spread any anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Okay. Never mind then. Regarding the military investigations at Avebury, Rudloe and Stonehenge, assuming they actually happened, little documented evidence has arisen and attempts at asking the locals if anyone knew of the story have apparently yielded no results. Given the amount of time that has elapsed, it seems unlikely for most of the eyewitnesses to still be alive. In regards to the suggestion that the creature might have some connection to the Mongolian death worm, there is in fact one recorded sighting that describes the latter creature as having eyes. Eyes are absolutely tiny on a body covered with worm-like ridges. Even those who believe in the existence of the Mongolian death worm would have to agree that any real connection is highly unlikely based on the description alone. While other investigators into the case have tried to track down more information on the ingots, the results have so far remained the same. Even searching the Agence France-Presse, as the poster indicated, produces no results. And Paula? Well, after voicing her intention to find and film the creature, Paula M seemingly vanished from the internet. If she's provided any updates or video in the time since, it certainly hasn't come to light. So far we've gone from an everyday dump site somewhere in Oregon to a mass vanishing in Vietnam, a Mongolian giant caterpillar, military secrets, and even English stone circles that apparently attract monsters. But what could have actually happened here? The fact that the dump creature blends so well into the prototypical giant worm cryptid category is likely what allowed it to intersect with unrelated stories so well, turning what would otherwise have been one or two singular sightings into something seemingly much larger. As it is, the sightings we do have are very much a mixed bag, with none providing physical evidence and almost all coming in second hand. Sometimes even whole decades elapsed between when the sightings occurred and when they eventually made it into writing. Personally, I'm not convinced all these sightings are connected. We've already ruled the story of the ingots as indistinguishable from an internet creepypasta, and the Mongolian deathworm simply doesn't match. While I do not have enough data on the other sightings to explain them, it's pretty clear few of them share consistent descriptions or locations. While I can't speak to the accuracy of these tangential accounts, Paula's sighting is probably one of the best I've come across. The sighting occurred in broad daylight in relatively close quarters over a period of at least 5 minutes and in a non-stressful atmosphere. In addition, compared to the other sightings, this one was transcribed a minimum of just under 2 years after the initial sighting. Still plenty of time for memories to unconsciously alter, but much better than literal decades. Add to that the fact that Paula has partaken in a radio interview which at least indicates there was a Paula. If someone can find that interview, that would also provide a first-hand source. That said, gathering together what little we know about the creature, is it possible to actually figure out the most likely explanation? Here's a list of the details we've been able to pick up from the account. Given the fur covering was described as a peach-like fuzz, it's entirely possible the fur wasn't a part of the creature itself, but rather some form of fungal skin infection. As for the eyes, taking things at face value, the fact that the pupils were crystal blue rather than the usual black indicates something may have been very wrong with them, either blindness or at the very least some form of ocular disease. This would also explain the creature's tolerance of staring directly towards the sun. The lack of segmentation and large eyes seems to rule out both caecilians, amphispinians, and most caterpillars. As much as I like the logic behind the caterpillar theory, even assuming it was a species without ridges, I can't find any species of caterpillar with eye spots that can cover those up. Indeed, the very presence of eyes most definitely rules out any kind of worm. Paula was similarly certain the creature she saw had no visible scales, also ruling out reptiles. That leaves us with amphibians, specifically salamanders. Simply on the face of it, many salamanders have smooth skin, a similar texture to humans, and disproportionately large eyes. Some have relatively small limbs that could be hidden from view. Regarding the other anomalies, there are fungal diseases amongst amphibians that can cloud the eyes and others that can create patches of fuzz across the skin. However, the most telling connection is that salamanders are one of the few groups that can pull their eyes inward through their skull, usually for protection and swallowing food. If the creature of the dump was real, in my opinion it was most likely some form of short-limbed salamander, whether known or unknown, in the grips of an advanced fungal disease. But alas, even that theory doesn't explain all the details. The explanation only hypothetically covers the strangeness of the eyes and supposed fuzz, and doesn't even come close to resolving why no nose or mouth was ever identified for 5 whole minutes. Given Paula's own research into the matter brought up nothing, I'm probably not qualified to close the book on this one, at least not completely. At the very least, I'm mostly satisfied that I've done the best I can. Okay, I realise there was a little bit of a letdown as far as endings go, so for this last section I thought I'd try something I've seen a few other channels employ. A bit of speculative zoology, albeit in a more fantastical context. In other words, let's assume most of these accounts are actually connected to one mystery creature and just have fun with the idea. I'm not really that fond of the shapeshifter theory since it honestly seems like a bit of a cop-out, so for the purpose of this I'm going to at least assume it's an actual creature, albeit in a fantastical version of our reality. I'm also not counting the Mongolian deathworm connection for reasons I've already explained. With all those criteria laid out, this is the creature I came up with. The lingot is an unusual species of entirely limbless amphibian, originating predominantly from Vietnam, which has grown more and more widespread over time. Able to change skin color so as to blend in with its environment, the species is most notable for its method of long-distance travel, able to curl up and create a field of loose ions around itself similar to ball lightning. The creature can hover and fully control its direction of travel in this state and doesn't seem to be harmed by the resulting energy in any way. It's not fully understood how lingots are able to do this, though they're speculated to exhibit similar electrocyte cells to those seen in species like the electric eel. Samples of the creature's mucus have also revealed a potent cocktail of chemicals which, under an electric current, become highly reactive at any temperatures. It is believed this may have initially evolved as a defense mechanism and only later became adapted into flight. The eyes of the creature are thus covered by a blue tinge protective cover, which also serves as shielding from glare, often giving the pupils a crystal blue coloration when seen during daylight hours. These covers can be opened in low light so as to improve night vision. The eyes themselves are very rarely opened, usually only for the purpose of navigation, with lingots otherwise relying on their other senses. While mostly harmless, lingots are incredibly dangerous to antagonize, able to project a beam of ions as an offensive and defensive weapon. Many unexplained disappearances have been attributed to unwitting civilians accidentally stepping on such creatures during walks. The species is carnivorous, mostly going after carrion, though not opposed to hunting prey of various sizes. Lingots are typically found in small to medium-sized groups for the purpose of protection, with larger groups and indeed larger individuals able to take on larger prey. If you should see a single lingot drawing attention to itself in a very obvious way, you should by no means approach it, as this may well be a part of an ambush. Documenting the natural history of the lingots has been especially difficult due to their unique physiology, though at least 3 subspecies have so far been identified, the largest growing up to 10 feet long and 1 foot in diameter. That said, we are continuously learning new things about this ever so rare and fascinating animal. And I think that's about it. If you have any fun ideas for more lingot lore, let us know in the comments. For now, it's about time we start drawing to a close. In the end, the story surrounding this sighting is probably the main thing that keeps me coming back to it, and if nothing else, it's still a fun story. I mean, think about it. Giant worms that have been seen across the globe and maybe tied to unexplained mass disappearances and mysterious phenomena? At the very least, that is the makings of an interesting fantasy or horror story. Like, I bash the story of the ingots, but if you actually go and read it, there is some seriously interesting attempts at building a mythos here. They put some effort into this, and I am all for it. Minus the fact they tried to pass off this as real with no proof. It's still fun, and I wouldn't have done this deep dive if I didn't think it was worth it. As much as I poked a little fun at some of the weird connections people have made, when you're given such weird information in the first place, again, it's only natural to try and make sense of it. And again, I do not mean to demean the eyewitness. Sometimes we have experiences that we cannot explain, and that's fine. It's not something we can help, it's just what it is. All we can do is try and understand what happened, and even then, that's not always possible. Overall, I still find this whole topic quite interesting all these years later, and I hope it was as fun for you to watch. Now, I have to say it, please don't bother anyone I mentioned in this video. I've seen that happen on a lot of other channels, so just saying. If you ever feel the need to take a dive down this pretty weird rabbit hole, or just browse the archive stories of About.com, you can find links to the archive sites in the description. The accounts themselves are not without the requirement of an open mind, however, if you're like me, then you can probably appreciate a fun story for what it is. Even the bits that are a little bit too questionable. Yeah, you might even find something I didn't. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little departure from the usual. Yet another video which took way longer to make than it probably should have. Part of that was because I didn't really have a clear idea of what I was creating going in. I just knew I wanted to create a video about everything I discovered years ago when I first heard about the sighting. Though another big issue that came up was that I completely misunderstood the law surrounding quoting and commenting on books. So I actually tried to contact N.Redfern thinking I needed his permission first. Fortunately, he never actually saw the message in the months since I sent it, so yeah, that was embarrassing. I don't know if I'll ever do any similar videos to this, since it really took a lot out of me. At the very least, hopefully I handled the topic as best I could. I did try to keep to a standard of treating actual first-hand eyewitnesses with respect, though in this case there were very few first-hand eyewitnesses. Either way, hopefully I did okay. I am tempted to create a video cataloguing strange stories from members of the Brony fandom. I know there are some strange stories, I have actually asked other people in the fandom, so let me know if that's something you actually want to see. And again, thank you all for watching, especially those who watched to the very end. Thank you.